time I get to say this of the year. Thursday night showdown is here for week 15 from awesomeo.com. Myself, Ben Raza, here with Alex Baker, who is obviously traveling, but he still makes time for the people, man of the people. What is going on? How are you?
I'm good, man. Kind of crazy day so far, but I'm happy to be here to talk about probably the game of the year. I mean, Jets.
Century.
The game of the my mistake.
It's okay. We'll let it slide because you're traveling. But yeah, we got the Jets, we got the Ravens, but we also have our sponsor Fantasy Draft, which I do want to talk about briefly before we dive into everything. We've been talking about them all year, but it's important to emphasize the fact that 100% of those entry fees are paid out to the winners. And over time, a DFS player can lose up to 30% of their bankroll due to rake. And Fantasy Draft has fixed that. So if you haven't been over there, if you want to sign up, promo code AWESOME, you'll get a 7-day free trial. You'll see how fast it can add up, and you can boost that bankroll. So we really recommend that. This is it, though. Yeah, I mean, we moved to Saturday games. We adjust the schedule. We couldn't end on a worse note. We have the Jets going to the Ravens. This game, we'll get right into it. It's a 16.5-point spread, one of the biggest of the year in Baltimore, over under 45 points. What are your thoughts when you see a game like that approaching it from Showdown perspective?
Well, it's crazy because Baltimore obviously has one of the higher totals we've seen all year, and the Jets have one of the lower totals. So I think it's going to be hard to really pick a game script here that isn't covered by a lot of people, because I'm sure everyone realizes who the good plays are. There are some injuries coming into play, so that makes things a little bit interesting, but it might be a stretch to really get unique here.
It's true. I mean, the number of teams, and we're going to dive into it, of course, that are going to be 5-man Raven stacks with one Jet. Le'Veon Bell comes to mind. It's going to be immense, and I don't know how much leverage you can get by doing that, even though logically I totally get it. But let's get to the injuries. They're mostly on the Jets side, so we've got Ryan Griffin out, Bilal Powell out. Ty Montgomery is questionable, but Le'Veon logged a full practice. He's back. He was sick. He went bowling. He's apparently fine now. That's a whole story for another time. Demaryius Thomas, a receiver on the Jets, doubtful. Then we've got the weapons on the Ravens side. Mark Andrews did not play a ton of snaps. He's going to give it a go, they say, but we have to monitor that. And then the big one, of course, Lamar, is questionable. It looks like he is going to play. But, oh, boy, if, they get up early and often, we may see him, maybe hit the bench. Out of all those, are you monitoring? I assume the Ravens ones are, to me, a bigger deal right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is I think you just covered the whole slate, so we can just call it there. Right?
Hey, that was a fun show, man. But seriously, this is the key right off the bat with Lamar and Mark Andrews.
Yeah, so I think Lamar, you gotta figure he gets there because he probably won't get benched until they're up by maybe 20 or something. So you gotta think that he puts up a good fantasy total in that time. Mark Andrews, on the other hand, is probably riskier. I don't have his snap totals in front of me, but if he is banged up, they might be a little bit less likely to lean on him, even if the game is a little bit closer.
Yeah, I mean, last week, just for reference, Nick Boyle actually took the large majority. And the thing about the Ravens, they've got multiple tight ends that they use, whether it's Hayden Hurst, Boyle, or Andrews. So we'll have to monitor that. I guess we'll get the bad part of the way. Let's start with the Jets. They beat Miami. I don't know if you can call that a victory. Miami kicked 7 field goals en route to the loss last week. They're overmatched in every aspect of it. But what do you make of this offense? We've got Sam Darnold. Le'Veon is back. Robbie Anderson, probably the main weapon. Are you going to look to them, even though they're going to be throwing late in the game? They should be down. What do you make of the pass catchers and Darnold?
Well, I think that Demaryius Thomas being doubtful does add a little bit of interest to these guys, because that's a bump to Robbie Anderson and whoever else they have on the team.
It's a fair question. I mean, you look at guys like Jameson, Crowder, obviously, and other than that, though, it's bad right off the bat. It's amazing how quickly it gets ugly.
Well, the guy I'm really interested in here is Vincent Smith. because when Demaryius Thomas only played about half the game last week, Vincent Smith played the other half. So I'm expecting pretty close to a 1-for-1 replacement of Demaryius Thomas with Vincent Smith. Braxton Berrios is the other guy. I think that's kind of the trap play because, I mean, he's going to be very cheap, but he didn't really see many snaps last game, even though Demaryius Thomas didn't play that much. So I think that this is not an apples-to-apples comparison where you're just picking one of those two guys.
No, I think that makes sense. And just looking, you kind of just confirmed it. Vincent Smith saw basically half the snaps last week. If Demaryius Thomas sits, he's going to be in line for a bigger role. He had 3 targets. That could expand. He's only $600 on DraftKings. So that's one of the guys. I don't know if he's Boston Scott, but he could be someone to take on that type of role. And then, so again, I know I mentioned this earlier. Le'Veon was sick. I don't, now he's back in action. It's a very tough matchup for all the Jets. Is he your favorite guy? As you mentioned in your tweet earlier today, you got to play at least one Jet. It would be nice if you didn't. Is he your favorite Jet to target on some of those Ravens stacks?
For sure, because, I mean, Bilal Powell's out.
Yep.
That would be kind of the way he doesn't get there because obviously he needs to be on the field, but he's going to put up steady numbers because he catches passes out of the backfield too. Ty Montgomery, they just haven't played a lot this year as a running back. I'm sure he plays a lot on special teams and whatnot, but basically what you can expect here is maybe like an 85-15 split. And with Le'Veon Bell on the field that much, he's going to score some points. And if the Jets don't get a touchdown, he's probably going to be the highest scorer. I mean, what do you think?
It's hard not to agree with that. I mean, you look at Marlon Humphreys on the outside, he's probably going to take Robbie Anderson and just the Jets in general. I know they're going to be throwing, but it's just bad. It's going to be inefficient. I think my strategy is going to be to pay down at receiver for the Jets. When I do, someone like Vincent Smith, try to get it more on a salary base rather than actually putting up raw point totals, whereas Le'Veon volume-wise could be in line for actually – an important amount of work, even though it's going to be inefficient. Other than that, though, I mean, I'm not chasing. Do you have any interest in a Jet tight end here, or is that just a complete stay away, given they really have no production at the position right now?
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Brown is the guy who's going to be on the field. He blocked instead of ran out for routes about like a third of the time, which is extremely high for a tight end. So that kind of shows their confidence that he's not effective enough to even be worth sending out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's really all that really needs to be said. I mean, just to summarize, we've got Darnold. We know he's going to be throwing it a lot. We've got Robbie Anderson, but he's going to draw tough coverage. Crowder, Vincent Smith, I think will both be in line for a good amount of work based on the formations and what we see with no tight end shipping in. And as the airport people possibly confirm, please do not leave luggage unattended. What I was going to say, Le'Veon is the guy who I really think takes on, the majority of the workload. I'm not going to start spewing how the Jets win this game because they don't. But if they keep it close, the only way it has to be with Le'Veon. It has to be with long, sustained drives, lean on the running game, and generate some type of rushing attack. I think that if you're going to target Le'Veon in like a captain spot, you may look for a lower scoring environment type game, maybe defenses, some of the kickers, which we'll get to, things like that, because I just don't see any way that the Jets can keep up with what has been shown as such a dynamic offense with Lamar. Is that really in line with what you're kind of thinking on the Jets side, just to sum it up?
Yeah, definitely. I think Le'Veon makes a nice captain because it's very possible the Ravens spread it out a lot. And Le'Veon could easily get to 20, 30 points, and that could be the highest score. So I don't hate that at all.
I think so. And then this is the more fun side to break down. So we got the Ravens. We've got Lamar. Well, I don't even say all his weapons because it's not like he is an embarrassment of riches, but they just are unstoppable with the way they run the ball with him and Ingram. They've got Mark Andrews. We'll see. Like I said, he is questionable. Hollywood Brown over the top. The floor is yours. What do you make of this Ravens team as a double-digit heavy favorite at home?
Well, I think that Lamar is definitely the obvious pick. I have him as about a 2 out of 3 chance of being the highest scorer on the slate. Now, last time I kind of incorrectly said that. I thought that it meant that you can't really play him in the flex. But I found when I was actually building lineups, usually you need a highest scorer in the MVP, but because he's so highly priced, that factor is mitigated to some extent. But it's going to be really hard to pin down any other Ravens other than Marquise Brown, who's kind of their steady contributor, because Mark Ingram is always overpriced. And then you go to guys who are just rotational players.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, we know that Hollywood Brown is more of a boom bust guy. That's just kind of how he works. They have other tight ends that can replace Andrew's production if he goes down. It really doesn't miss a beat. It's more about, so you got guys, Miles Boykin, Willie Snead. These are guys, even Seth Roberts, they're going to see the field more than you would think. I just worry about volume. But really, I want to kind of step back to what you said. Lamar is going to be insanely. If he didn't have a Q tag, this would be astronomical ownership. He's still going to play and he's going to be effective, but you're talking over 20,000 for a captain spot on DraftKings. Are there enough permutations around him, or can we? I referenced this earlier in the year. Is this a situation where we might be able to get almost leverage on him by not rolling him in certain spots, whether it's captain or at the flex, depending on where the ownership funnel?
I think the leverage would be like not having him in the flex, because the chance that he is between the second and sixth highest player is actually pretty low because he has such a high chance of being the highest scoring player. So I wouldn't be afraid of kind of putting him in the captain and then having some sketchy plays around him just to get a unique combination. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think there's just something. I think you can get of course, you're going to be able to build effective lines both ways. I just, especially if you put him at captain, keep in mind that everyone is losing over 20,000. There's just not that many ways to get leverage. So unless you have a weird build around him, I'm not sure how effective that can be. We'll see. And like we've always preached on this show, yes, you want to make, of course, as optimal lineups as you can. And it's a perfect time to mention that your Showdown projections are actually in front of the paywall today. That's a staple of how I build Showdown. Of course, I know for you and all our subs, it's a great tool that you need to check out. But what we also have to pay attention to is the ownership around those builds. If you have it with 500 other people, even if you get it right, the payoff long-term is just not going to justify those type of teams.
Yeah, I think that certain guys will make your lineup a lot more chalky. And those are going to be the guys that really stand out as a value play. Guys like Vincent Smith, who every sharp player going off projections, have him projected for 6 points at 600. And that makes him one of the best values on the slate. And that's like the definition of an optimizer play. So if you have Lamar and Vincent Smith, that just narrows the amount of ways you can be unique a lot. Same with maybe like a Justice Hill or Braxton Berrios. So I think it's going to be a little bit tricky to be creative tonight, but hopefully we can figure out some way.
Yeah, I mean, and then looking at the backfield, so Mark Ingram is certainly the guy that's going to be tasked with leading the charge. Last week played, just over half of the offensive snaps. Gus Edwards came in right behind him, but he only touched, 4 carries against Buffalo. He could get some work if the game gets out of hand. Maybe you lean on that type of narrative that they do give him a little more work. 4,800 though, for a guy like that, I don't really love that price tag over on DraftKings for him. I don't know how much work you get. I think I would rather pay down. You mentioned Justice Hill. He's only $200. He's more of an explosive guy. Now, he may not get any work, but man, 4,800, I don't know if I could justify the backup running back at that kind of price.
Yeah, and especially because on Baltimore, these guys don't get targeted a lot because there's so much scrambling going on. So in general, the Ravens running backs every single week, whether it's Classic or Showdown, are just very overpriced.
Yeah, it's tough. And, I do think you can play. We always preach scenarios, as most people do with Showdown. I do think that you can do some if scenarios with Lamar's injury specifically. I do think there is a window where he doesn't run as much, and that really is going to impact. his production. So if they get up early, I cannot believe that they will be calling. Yeah, of course on a scramble maybe he runs, but they have designed runs in this offense. With a quad injury on a Thursday night against the Jets, I could see his carry total be way down tonight, and that's something to keep in mind if we just think that it's going to be a different type of Lamar. That's one way we could possibly get leverage on the field.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting because obviously you're playing this scenario and no one really knows what the likelihood of that scenario coming true is. So I think that's where a lot of the strategy is going to come in.
Yeah, I mean, just looking over his rushing totals, he had 11 last week, 16 against the Niners, 8, 10, 7, 16, 14, 19, 14. I mean, these are healthy totals, especially for a quarterback. If he has a handful of carries in this game, that's an if. That's a big if. But man, would I build differently knowing that? And I plan to make lineups based on that narrative. And then, of course, some other ones that will try to cover other scenarios. But let's move, because I don't really have that much else to say on the skill position players. We'll talk defense and kickers. This game, it's hard to imagine that Justin Tucker isn't the preferred kicker for you. One of the best, if not the best in the league. The Jets, I mean, aren't going to be scoring nearly as much. Am I fair in saying that you prefer him over Sam Ficken?
Yeah, absolutely. Because if you're going to get Ficken, you got to throw in Jets players, and that's kind of. I mean, he's a lower probability play, and the guys you get with him are going to be worse. Tucker, he fits in nicely with any Ravens players you got, so because he's going to be scoring when they have touchdowns or if they just get yards.
Absolutely. I mean, thinking about, I would highly advise against just like rolling Ficken alone as your lone jet. I don't see that scenario panning out. It just, there's too many avenues. Justin Tucker, what you need, and I think the way he gets there is certainly that they stall in the red zone. They're going to move the ball. I think we all know that. He's one of the most, like I said, he's maybe the best kicker ever. The guy's unbelievable. He doesn't miss. So he's going to have his chances. He should rack up the extra points along with that. Always with kickers, you've always talked about, that they have a lower range of outcomes. They give you a decent floor. I don't think they're a good idea at captain or anything like that. But you can use them kind of as a mix and match type thing. On the defensive side, though, again, we have a price discrepancy. The Ravens are much more expensive than the Jets for good reason. What do you make of the two defenses in this matchup?
Well, I think the Jets defense is pretty good. And that's one maybe caveat for staying or for being a little bit lower on Baltimore rushing is because the Jets rushing defense has been one of the best in the league. Their passing defense has been good too. But the matchup's horrible. So that's going to make the defense a bad play. Because really the way you score points is by mistakes of the opponent, not by superior play.
Absolutely. It's all, I mean,
Bienvenido.
who's there? So absolutely. That's a point that I kind of want to talk about while you get the announcements out of the way over there. It's not just about how good your defense is. Jameis Winston is the perfect example week after week. He makes insane mistakes and it elevates defenses that are sometimes awful into some of the premier scoring options. Then you have other defenses that are really sound, but they're playing a quarterback that doesn't make a lot of mistakes, and they give you marginal points. Lamar, like I said, I think his rushing will be tempered a bit, but he doesn't fumble as often. He doesn't push the ball too far down the field when he doesn't have to, and he's pretty conservative, to be honest. He has a way of really not making mistakes. I don't think that the Jets are going to get a ton of pressure, which makes the task even harder. You're looking for a block, a return, something that you're not going to predict. So for me, I actually agree with you. I don't think they're the worst defense out there in terms of just if I had to rank the defenses in the league. But for a fantasy perspective, particularly with this matchup, I just don't see that many ways that they get there. Now, on the other side, Sam Darnold, the ghost buster over there, he's got some issues. What do you make of the Ravens defense? Do you think they can cause a lot of problems for Darnold?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Ravens defense is kind of a lock in any Baltimore stack because if the Jets are behind particularly, they're going to be slinging it, and that is a recipe for turnovers. So I think there's a huge potential here.
Yeah, I mean, they've shown Marcus Peters is just out of control. Apparently, he just scores. each and every week they're going to be popular. And when you have a popular defense, you can look to maybe deviate. There's just not that many options. Whether it's Gus Edwards, Nick Boyle, Hayden Hurst, those are similar priced guys. I'm not sure what else to do. And Vincent Smith is going to turn into chalk. That is possible that he will be somewhat popular, as Chad pointed out. But let me just ask you this because I have to. Because if this happens and we don't mention it, I'll never live myself down. You're not going to make any RG3 lineups, are you?
No. I mean, yeah. When they put in the backup quarterback, they're not usually like trying to throw the ball or run the quarterback. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay, good. I just want to get that out there before something happens. And then I people are like, why didn't you mention the old RG3 play?
I mean, the way you get there is if Lamar somehow doesn't make it past the first quarter or something.
Correct. But if that happens, I'll let the other people, more power to anyone that's crazy enough to do that. I'm not doing that. Well, we got a little time left here, and we're going to bump on out soon enough, but let's just specifically move to captain for a second. I know you talked about Le'Veon for the Jets. We know Lamar, of course, can be a captain. Is there someone like Hollywood Brown who's like very boom bust that you think is interesting? Is it a running back or someone against the grain? What do you make of your captain portfolio tonight?
I mean, I think you can go to the usual suspects. So it doesn't have to just be Lamar and Bell. Hollywood Brown is a good option. He's had huge games already, so I don't think it's going to be any secret that the upside's there. I mean, Lamar's had games where he's thrown 4 touchdowns or more, so going to some receivers at captain seems pretty viable.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, wide receivers, we all know, huge upside. And again, Hollywood Brown is the type of guy, he can make the most of a couple catches. You need him to do his damage early in a game like this. But we've talked about, and we did games, I think Redskins Vikings earlier in the year. We did Patriots Giants, I want to say. And you've always preached. Obviously, the Jets, they cover this spread basically a coin flip amount of time. They keep it close. Not often, but they do keep it close sometimes. There's a non-zero chance they win the game, but I'll tell you, it's pretty damn close to zero, but that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying, it's not a given that the Ravens win. I know it feels like they're going to win 42-10, but most likely they're not going to. It could be a competitive game, and it is possible that the Jets do produce some valuable, pertinent showdown plays.
I think it's worth mentioning, too, that lines aren't always efficient. So, the public estimation of Ravens couldn't be higher right now, and the Jets have been kind of a terrible team. So some of that is just kind of random results in games that lead to these opinions, even among the sharpest people. So I definitely think it's possible that the Ravens are a little bit overrated and the Jets are underrated.
I think, again, when the ownership funnels, and that's one of the tools we have behind the paywall that you definitely should check out for our members. And if you haven't signed up, that's why you should. So many people are going to build with 5 Ravens tonight that I actually think almost doing what normally is very balanced, like a 3v3 or a 4v2, even if you go on the Jet side, you're gonna filter out a lot of duplicate lineups that way. And I kind of encourage that. We had a question from friend of the show and fellow teammate Jake Hari in chat. He was saying, using the ownership projections, he's seeing some lines that projected to be duped like 500 times. Is there a duplicate number that you're kind of comfortable with, or is it? Do you have a system with something like that, or is there a number where you'd start maybe kind of shying away from what could potentially be a lot of dupes?
So I think it depends on how big the tournament you're playing in it is, because obviously Jake is talking about the one with the 300K or whatever up top. So in that tournament, I'm a lot more contrarian because you get rewarded a lot more for unlikely lineup hitting. So one thing I'll do is I'll eliminate some of the top projected lineups just because I know those are too easy to figure out. Everyone's going to have them. There's more of an edge in kind of trying to outsmart people by finding low projected lineups that have a good correlation that can get you to the top.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I think the structure of the tournament itself is super important because in a smaller field, I know for me, I was doing not to tangent, but President's Cup in golf, and it was a new format. It was Showdown format. And certainly when I built for some smaller field things, I wasn't nearly as concerned about being pretty vanilla. When I'm talking and trying to beat hundreds of thousands of people, every little bit, you really want to be pretty radical because the payoff, if you ever get a team up there with limited dupes or a unique team, as we've seen, it's a life changer. So that's something that you definitely want to be cognizant of when you build. So final thoughts for me, and like I said, we're going to duck out of here, chat. If you can hit the like button, I always do appreciate it. The man over there who is trooping it out from an undisclosed location also appreciates it. It really does help the show. And like I said, we've had such a fun year doing this Thursday night show. We're going to have plenty of content, with Saturday slates approaching. We'll keep everybody posted. But I think for me, just to give my kind of thoughts on what I plan to do, it's going to be to try to prioritize the Ravens skill position players because I'm going to go underweight on Lamar. So I'm going to lean on probably Ingram, whoever I think gets the run at tight end, probably Hollywood Brown at receiver, and see what I can do building around what I think will be a lower, ceiling type Lamar tonight and hope that pans out. What about you? Just final thoughts before we duck on out of here.
I think you don't have to get too fancy here. I'm probably going to just fade the most popular lineups and not really too much about stacking one way or the other because the result of the game seems so as much as certainty. Of course, we could get some egg on our face later when the 5
famous last word.
Yeah, as I mentioned, if you're playing in smaller fields, don't mix up as much, but avoid those lineups that just fit too perfectly.
I think so. And I think for me, on a slate like this with such a ridiculous spread, even more every week, it's important to know what contest you're playing, but even more so this week, just because I think Lamar is so polarizing that he's really going to take lineup construction to a level that we're not accustomed to when you're allocating so much of your salary to one player. So make sure you know what fields to maybe take that stand and other fields where you can go kind of just best available, whether it's, Vincent Smith paying down, guys that are going to be correlated in those lineups. So on that note, we did it. We got through the entire Thursday night football season. As I said, there will be Saturday games, and we're certainly going to have everything you need over at awesemo.com for that. And we're going to finish the season strong, and then we'll keep it chugging with golf, basketball, bowl season for me. I'm very excited on the college football level to get after that. But Alex, thanks for sticking it out from the airport. Much appreciated. Thanks to Fantasy Draft sponsoring the show. Go sign up over there. And good luck, everyone. We hope someone takes it down tonight. Jets, Ravens, and we will be back next week, but on Sunday for our game plan show. Good luck.